What if I told you that there is something in your body that has been silenced for centuries, something that is not only pleasure, but a memory? It's not a myth, it's not a fad, it's real. And today, you're going to see it in a way you've never been told before. Before continuing, subscribe if you feel that the female body deserves to be heard, not judged. This channel is a space to discover hidden truths. Truths like this: for centuries, the female body has been a hidden, manipulated, silenced territory. There is no period in history in which attempts have not been made to control what happens in a woman's intimacy. And yet, despite so much censorship, shame, and repression, there was always a corner where the truth resisted. A truth that is not taught in schools, that does not appear in medical textbooks, that was distorted in pornography and reduced to morbid curiosity. That truth is called squirting. Many have seen it, very few understand it, and almost no one honors it. But what if it weren't just a fluid? What if what springs forth is energy that has been stagnant for generations? What if each drop is an ancestral tear that has finally found its way out? Imagine that what you feel is not just pleasure, but liberation. Imagine that what flows is not just water, but soul. Various cultures knew this. In the tantric tradition of India, they spoke of Amrita, the sacred nectar that springs forth when a woman enters a state of absolute surrender. This is not just any orgasm. It is a ritual of purification, an act of surrender, a sign that something inside has finally broken in order to heal. Because when the womb speaks, it does not do so with words, it does so with water. Water cannot remain stagnant. If it does not flow, it rots. And the same is true of emotions, of inherited wounds, of the memories of the female lineage. When a woman releases that water, she is also releasing the weight of her grandmothers, her great-grandmothers, all those who were silenced. Do you see how profound this is? It's not pornography. It's not morbid curiosity. It is the body saying, enough is enough. If this resonates with you, you are not alone, and you're not the only one who has felt that there is something beyond what you've been told. Join this community. Subscribe. This channel exists to open real, courageous, and necessary conversations, not to teach empty techniques, but to remember forgotten truths. Because squirting is not a trick, it's an act of sacred disobedience, a moment when a woman's body regains its voice, and that voice is uncomfortable, because it cannot be controlled, because it cannot be faked, because it cannot be silenced. If you feel that your body holds something that has not yet been said, if you've ever wondered why you were taught to silence your pleasure, leave me a comment. Tell me if you've ever felt like something inside you wanted to come out. And subscribe now, because this is just the beginning of a journey that will take us much deeper. We're not talking about the female body here. Here we listen to it. And don't leave, because the really impressive part starts now. For centuries, the female body has been a hidden, manipulated, and silenced territory. There is no period in history in which there has not been an attempt to explain, reduce, or control what happens in a woman's intimacy. And yet, despite so much censorship, despite so many prohibitions and inherited shame, there was always a corner where the truth resisted. A truth that is not taught in schools, that does not appear in common medical manuals, that was distorted in pornography and reduced to morbid curiosity by those who never understood its true nature. I am talking about squirting. Many have seen it, very few understand it. Some seek it as a bedroom trophy, a kind of masculine or feminine achievement, an impressive physical spectacle. But what if it were something more? What if what flows out is not just fluid? What if what appears to be water is, in fact, the stagnant energy of entire generations of women? Imagine that every drop that flows is not just pleasure, but memory, healing, liberation. Imagine that this liquid stream is not simply an orgasm, but a language of the soul, Today we are going to immerse ourselves in a different journey, not a guide to techniques or instructions on how to provoke this phenomenon. None of that. What we are going to do is decipher what it means, what it represents, why it has been so hidden, and why in the 21st century it is still uncomfortable to talk about it. Because when the womb speaks, it does not do so with words, it does so with water. Throughout history, various cultures have sensed that water was closely linked to the soul and feminine energy. In the tantric tradition of India, for example, there was talk of Amrita, the nectar of the gods. This sacred liquid flowed from the female body when a woman reached a state of absolute openness, a trance in which there was no longer ego or control, only surrender. It was not an orgasm as understood in the West, but a portal, an access to another dimension of consciousness. When that threshold was crossed, water flowed, and water does not lay. Water cannot remain in a place where there is pain or repression. Water, at any level, always seeks movement, seeks a channel, seeks an outlet. And if it does not find one, it stagnates. And when it stagnates, it rots, it loses vitality. The same thing happens in the female body. Emotions, traumas, inherited shame, silenced abuse, sexual repression, and even self-censorship create a blockage in the womb. All of this accumulates like water held back by an invisible dam. And when the right moment finally arrives, when there is a moment of love, trust, vulnerability, or even total surrender, that dam breaks. And then squirting occurs. What many women feel at that moment is not necessarily similar to the common pleasure of an orgasm. It is more like crying, but not crying out of sadness, rather crying out of purging, relief, and surrender. It is as if the body had been holding on to something nameless for years, and suddenly, in a matter of seconds, released it in the form of water. And afterwards, what remains is not euphoria, but peace, as if an old wound had been washed away. That is why what comes out at that moment is not vulgarity, it is not pornography, it is not spectacle, it is truth. It is the female body speaking in its own language, and that language is uncomfortable for the system, because it cannot be controlled. If we think about it, every culture has treated water as a sacred symbol. Water baptizes, cleanses, purifies. Water connects life to the earth. Water is emotion, it is energy. It is the opposite of the rigid control of fire. And when water emerges from a woman's body in the form of squirting, what is released is not only liquid, but memory. Because the uterus, that center so often forgotten or reduced solely to motherhood, does not only hold biological life, it also holds emotional life. There lie the traces of every relationship, every experience, every painful word, every imposed silence. And not only from this life. According to ancestral teachings, it also holds memories of lineage, echoes of generations of women who were never able to express what they felt. Every woman, without knowing it, carries within her the silent memory of her grandmothers, her great-grandmothers, all those who were silenced, repressed, ashamed for feeling. That chain of silence is transmitted in the blood, in the DNA, in the body itself. And then one day something breaks that chain, and then squirting happens. When the water gushes out, the echo of those memories also gushes out. It is not simply the pleasure of a moment, it is the healing of something much greater. And the most striking thing is that this happens in silence, without the mind needing to understand it, without words to describe it. The body knows it, the soul recognizes it, and the water expresses it. It is no coincidence that this phenomenon has been ridiculed, minimized, or reduced to spectacle, because what is not understood and cannot be controlled is always uncomfortable. Squirting challenges the rules of a system that needs the female body to be predictable, obedient, logical. And here the opposite occurs, the unpredictable, the untamable, the wild. Squirting is, in essence, an act of sacred disobedience, a reminder that there is something in a woman's body that does not respond to external commands, that cannot be faked, that cannot be programmed like a machine. An act in which the soul takes control, and the mind surrenders. If you've ever wondered why so many patriarchal cultures wanted to control female sexuality, here's a clue. Because a woman's true power lies not only in giving biological life, it lies in her body's ability to liberate, to heal, to transform through its own energy. And nothing is more dangerous to a system of control than a woman who remembers that power. Now, the interesting thing is that many women who have experienced this phenomenon describe sensations that go far beyond the physical. Some say that after this release, they feel a void filled with calm. Others report crying, not out of sadness, but out of relief. Some even express that it is as if an inner voice had been silenced and suddenly, at last, was able to speak, albeit not with words. All of this points to the same thing. Squirting is not a superficial act, it is a deeply ceremonial act, even if it occurs without an explicit ritual. Imagine for a moment a woman who was never able to cry about abuse, who was never able to express a no with her voice, who swallowed her tears for years because society told her she had to smile, please, and be quiet. That woman holds within her a nameless ocean, and one day, when her body feels safe, when she finally allows herself to let her guard down, that ocean finds a crack and comes out. That is squirting, the liquid cry of the womb. The most sacred thing about all this is that, when it happens, it does not transform the person watching, but the person experiencing it. Because it is she who finally lets go, it is she who finally recognizes herself, it is she who finally remembers that her body is not broken, that her sensitivity is not exaggerated, that her water is sacred. In many traditions, water has always been a portal. In baptism, it opens the door to a new life. In shamanic rites, it cleanses the soul. In dreams, it represents deep emotions. And in the female body, when it emerges as squirting, it also opens a door, the door to emotional truth that had been silenced. It is not about techniques, tricks, or bedroom secrets. It is about trust, because squirting does not spring from an aroused body, but from a trusting body. A body that feels at home, that has made peace with its past, that allows itself to surrender. And this is where the discomfort lies. Because a woman who allows herself to release in this way, who allows herself to cry her soul out with water, is a woman who can no longer be controlled. She can no longer be locked in the chains of shame. She can no longer be convinced that her pleasure is dirty. She can no longer be manipulated into believing that her sensitivity is a defect. A woman who releases herself in this way has rediscovered her center and returned home. That is why this phenomenon is not taught in schools, does not appear in common medical manuals, and is not openly mentioned in conversation, because to recognize it would be to recognize that the female body holds a power that cannot be tamed. Squirting is an act of truth, a truth that comes out with force, that floods, that washes away, a truth that cannot be faked or hidden. And that truth is uncomfortable, because the modern world is accustomed to disguising, to covering up, to simulating. But here there is no simulation. Here the soul takes the microphone and speaks in its own language. And here we come to the key point, water as a universal symbol, because water connects cultures, connects religions, connects rites, from ancient Greece, where springs were believed to be sacred, to indigenous peoples who spoke of water as the blood of the earth. It has always been clear that water is not just matter, it is spirit. And when water flows from the female body, it does not do so to entertain. It does so to remember that the body is not a machine, to remember that pleasure is not a sin, to remember that healing does not come from outside, but from within, to remember that feminine energy, even when silenced, always finds a way to flow. In this first part of our journey, we have opened the threshold of the symbolic, the ancestral, and the spiritual. We have seen how squirting is not a vulgar phenomenon or a spectacle, but a secret language, an unconscious ritual, an act of liberation. But the mystery does not end here, because science, with its need to measure and classify everything, has also tried to decipher this enigma. And what it has found not only explains, but also conceals. In the second part, we will delve into what biology says, what studies reveal, how medicine tries to pigeonhole this phenomenon, and what escapes its formulas. Because understanding science is also part of healing the taboo. And now that we have traveled the path from the biological to the symbolic, from the scientific to the spiritual, it is time to delve into something that often remains in the shadows: how female squirting is not only a physical phenomenon, but also an emotional and even transcendental experience. Many women who have experienced this form of ejaculation describe not only physical release, but also a state of emotional catharsis, uncontrollable laughter, crying, trembling, and a deep silence after climax. Some researchers link it to the release of oxytocin and prolactin, hormones associated with attachment, tenderness, and calm. But beyond the medical aspect, we could interpret it as a kind of internal reset. The body finds a release that words cannot always provide. And here we enter fascinating territory: the connection between squirting and emotional memory. Recent studies suggest that the body stores tension in the pelvic tissues, muscles, and vaginal walls. When female ejaculation occurs, that repeated contraction and release can help release emotional burdens stored for years. It is as if pleasure becomes therapy. Could squirting then be seen as a kind of modern purification ritual? Some schools of holistic sexology say yes. In ancient cultures, fluids were symbols of fertility and rebirth. Today, when a woman goes through this experience, even in the privacy of her bedroom, she unconsciously revives that same archetype of rebirth from within. However, talking about this remains uncomfortable. Many women have experienced it in silence, even with shame, because patriarchal society has tried to minimize or ridicule it. Some have thought they were urinating, that something was wrong with their bodies, that they should repress it, and that confusion has dampened the joy it could bring. But here's the revolutionary part. When a woman understands that squirting is not filth, but a secret language of her body, she regains power over her sexuality. This opens up another dimension, that of the partner or companion, because for many women, allowing it to happen requires deep trust. Squirting is not something that can be forced like a button, but a state that flourishes when there is security, patience, playfulness, and communication. And that's where more human questions come in. How willing are men to accompany this journey without judgment? How much do couples understand that what is important is not the fluid itself, but the liberation, openness, and vulnerability it implies? Let's return to the scientific realm, because there is mystery there too. There are intense debates among specialists. Some argue that it is the expulsion of diluted urine from the bladder. Others insist that a different fluid is released, produced in the so-called skene's glands, an area of the female reproductive system, analogous to the male prostate. Chemical analysis show the presence of both urea and prostate antigen, which keeps the discussion open. And rather than closing that discussion, we should celebrate it. It shows that the female body still holds secrets that science has not yet fully deciphered. But isn't it wonderful that in the 21st century, with all our technological advances, the female body is still an enigma? Perhaps this mystery is a reminder that not everything should be reduced to cold data. Squirting, in addition to being a subject of study, is a vital, unrepeatable, and personal experience. Let's imagine then that every woman who experiences it is opening a portal, one to her own power, to her reconciliation with pleasure, to the freedom of not feeling limited by taboos. In a way, it is a form of decolonizing the body, of resting from centuries of prejudice, the truth that female pleasure is vast, diverse, and legitimate. In some tantric circles, female ejaculation has been described as sacred water, a nectar that cleanses and blesses. It may sound poetic, but it has a symbolic background. Associating the flow with the sacred means restoring its dignity. It means recognizing that women's sexuality is not just reproduction or entertainment, but a path to higher states of consciousness. If we look back, we find that this view is not new. In ancient Eastern texts, Indian rituals, and some Taoist traditions, female fluids were already referred to as divine energies. What we now call squirting was not seen as an accident, but as a portal to transcendence. Perhaps what we have done in modern times is to forget, censor, and now, little by little, rediscover. Whether we like it or not, this topic touches on very deep issues: science, religion, culture, eroticism, power, shame, freedom. Everything is mixed together in the same stream. And perhaps that is the very essence of squirting, a flow that breaks down boundaries, that cannot be classified into a single category, because it is biology and emotion, physiology and poetry, liquid and symbol at the same time. At this point, we could pause and ask ourselves, what does it mean then, for a woman to ejaculate? Is it just a physical reflex, or is it also a message from the body that says I am alive, I am free, I allow myself to flow? Perhaps the answer is not to choose between the scientific and the spiritual, but to accept that they are two sides of the same coin. Female squirting is mystery and evidence, pleasure and catharsis, taboo and liberation. Therefore, rather than giving a definitive conclusion, I want to leave you with an open question. Do you think squirting should continue to be seen only as a medical and erotic phenomenon, or should we also begin to recognize it as a symbol of female freedom, rebirth, and inner power? If you found this topic revealing, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends, because together we can continue to break silences and restore dignity to the hidden stories of the female body.